Dear FKCCI members, dear participants, thank you very much to be with us today. I'm Cedric Legrand, the director of the French-Korean Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Since the beginning of the crisis, we launched a series of webinars to support companies to overcome key challenges we are facing today. We are thankful to all the experts in our network who are very active in bringing key insight to the French-Korean business community. During our last webinar about economic perspective in Korea, we saw that several indicators emphasize the resilience of the Korean economy, which should be the least affected among OECD countries. Today, we will focus on the strategy to take advantage of this positive outlook in Korea, given the current dynamics toward digitalization and e-commerce. To deal with this topic, we are very pleased to welcome our member ASIANCE to understand how to adapt your digital strategy to the new normal in Korea. ASIANCE is a brand tech company with many years of experience and expertise on digital strategy in Korea. Today, we will have the pleasure to host Mr. Olivier MOUROUX, CEO of ASIANCE and Vice President of FKCCI, Mrs. Gabi YOON, consultant at ASIANCE, and Mrs. Yongjoo NAMKOONG, Digital Marketing Strategist at ASIANCE, who will join us for the Q&A session. During the presentation, please feel free to share your question in the Q&A section of the Zoom application. We'll now begin with Mr. Olivier MOUROUX.
Thank you, Cedric. Dear FKCCI members, dear partners, dear friends. So my name is Olivier MOUROUX, and I'm the Vice President of the French-Korean Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And I'm delighted to launch this special webinar today about the impact of COVID-19 in the Korea digital ecosystem. This is for me a very special webinar, as I'm also the CEO and co-founder of ASIANCE, a brand tech company that for the last 20 years has been helping over 300 global companies building their brand awareness in this unique Korean market. COVID-19 has fully changed the way we are experiencing our shopping experience and even our omni-channel experience. Where, how, what we buy, how we interact with people in store and online, and where we take decisions on which product we want to buy. The economy will restart in a U, V, W shape, and uncertainty will still be part of our daily life. This uncertainty will deeply transform our habits. As risks remain, consumers will continue to stay home longer, and they will accelerate their shift to the digital world by being more demanding on the type of services that we will need to develop in the future. Today, we are not wondering anymore on whether the world will shift to digital, but what should I do not to miss the opportunity to answer my clients, my employees' needs in this digital ecosystem. I just came back from France. I was in quarantine for 14 days, late August, and I can tell you that even if online shopping works very well in Korea, we are still missing the deeper experience that we might see coming with VR. We are still not there. It was fine to buy a day-to-day product, but for more complex and expensive products, it was very difficult to get some personalized information. And it brought me a lot of frustration not to be able to decide which product would be the best for me. For the last 6 months, a major part of the population has been experiencing more intensive daily online activities, such as working, watching news and movie, learning, training, shopping online platform, gaming, and so on. These people created a new norm, and we can define them today not as Millennium or Gen Z, but as a cross-generational new identity that I like to call GenCo, which stands for Generation COVID or Corona. To jump deeper on this new concept, my team will bring you some interesting data on the actual situation in several industries. Until the beginning of this year, we have seen the market evolving at a very fast pace. Many of the changes that are happening now will last into the post-COVID era. Today, we want to share with you insights on how brands can adapt to the new normal in Korea. We want to show you data about customer behavior in shopping and digital media, along with brand cases from various businesses. We hope that this webinar will give you an overview of what needs to be prepared for 2021. So I'm joined today by our experts and consultants from two teams. First, Gabi YOON, who will make the presentation, then Yongjoo NAMKOONG, who will participate to the Q&A session. Please, Gabi, let's start.
I would like to thank Cedric, but also Olivier for the introduction. And I would also like to thank all the attendees for taking part in this webinar. I will quickly share my screen. I am Gabi YOON, as I was introduced as, and I am a consultant at ASIANCE. To give you a brief introduction about myself, I myself was born in Switzerland, and I came to Korea to pursue a master's degree and have since stayed here to pursue a career in digital marketing in Korea. So at ASIANCE, I am in the business development team, and we are in charge of handling initial consulting services to clients that wish to either enter Korea with a digital strategy or expand their digital strategy. So for example, we offer open innovation workshops, startup matching, but also digital strategy consulting with the focus of various subtopics to match the brand's needs. So I was working with many global brands long before the COVID-19 outbreak and have since personally observed many changes. And with that, many brands also expressed their interest in understanding the new dynamics as they want to prepare for the post-COVID era. So today, the presentation I want to share with you will be on how to adapt your digital strategy to the new normal in Korea. So this will be the content of the presentation. We're gonna look at the key changes in shopping, also in digital media during the pandemic. And then we will look at the trends and changes in specific industries, for example, entertainment, fashion and beauty, but also travel, leisure, hobbies, etc. Then we will look at 3 main case studies, conclude with insights, and then with a Q&A. And do not hesitate to ask any questions during this presentation in the chat and the Q&A tool. And we will be happy to answer them later with the help of my colleagues. Good. The first infection in South Korea was confirmed in January of this year, much earlier compared to Europe and to the States. And the number of infected people peaked by the end of February, as you can see. And by April, the number eventually stabilized with less than 100 people confirmed cases per day. And at the same time, when it was getting stabilized in South Korea, it was beginning to become a global pandemic. So, but due to the quick and systematic reaction by the Korean government, but also by Korean in general, because many participated in the social distancing measures, etc., most Koreans returned to daily activities by May, we would say. By the end of August, now we are experiencing a second wave, but because we have heightened social distancing measures, we have increased to 2.5. The number is stabilizing again, but we actually don't know when we will return to the more stabilized number, and we also don't know when the third wave will come. But generally, the great graph illustrates quite well how the COVID-19 development was quite different in Korea compared to Europe and the States. And it also might hint that Korea has entered the new normal much sooner. So despite the fact that South Korea was the country with the most cases after China by February, we can say that we are already going back to the new normal. And whereas there are many changes that will also go back to as before after the pandemic, we can also say very certainly that many of the change will prolong. So we could actually summarize it by saying, because of social distancing, regulations and guidelines, but also the sentiments of fear and frustration among the Korean people, there was an acceleration in the growth of digital trends, but also an increased shift to online usage. And those have triggered changes in product demand, platform usage, purchase behavior, and time spending. Now it is up to us to assess which of the changes will prolong and also how we can now adapt to the new normal. So what does it now mean for the brand, and why is digital marketing more important than ever now? We can with high certainty say that a digitalized customer journey is now the bottom line. It is inevitable. So that means that touch points are evolving, and brands must now also identify the relevant changes. Therefore, organizations must unlearn and relearn to adapt to the new normal. So before we look at the behavioral changes, I want to quickly go into the digital Korean landscape. It is very unique, and I'm sure that many of you know already, which is why I'm going to do it quickly. The biggest digital players in Korea can be named as Naver and Kakao. Naver being an equivalent to Google, being the most used search engine in Korea. Kakao being the most used messenger app, similar to WhatsApp and WeChat, etc. But by now, both companies have now expanded their service portfolios to a very large extent that their O2O services expand to other areas. For example, they can also be considered a social media channel, but also video content and online shopping channel. But although Korea has its own digital ecosystem, unlike in China, Koreans still use many global platforms. But then you can also see that depending on the category, Koreans might use more or less global platforms. For example, if you look at online shops, you can see that Koreans predominantly use Korean platforms. So the internet, but also the smartphone penetration rate, especially is quite high, both over 95%. That means that digital literacy is quite high. Koreans usually spend 3 hours and 40 minutes on average on their phones. And also South Korea is the 7th largest e-commerce market in the world, also being the 3rd largest in Asia, next after China and Japan. And also the solid infrastructure provided the fast delivery, and that means that contributed to the fast growth of the Korean e-commerce even more. So e-commerce sales in 2019 amounted to 20% of total retail sales. And from July 2019 to July 2020, now to this year, sales in online shopping grew by 16%, fueled by the Corona crisis. So let's look at the changes in consumption behavior in Korea. So we at ASIANCE have identified 3 key trends that have influenced the consumption behavior of Koreans during the pandemic. Social distancing, governmental guidelines, but also the sentiments of the people have especially triggered the trends untact and home economy. Untact entails situations which avoid face-to-face and direct contact between people. And home economy means that the consumption has shifted more to the household's home. And also from a psychographic view, the frustration and fear aspect of the population caused an already existing trend called flex to be evolved into flex 차린고비. So it's a trendy word that entails a consumption behavior that is very polarizing. It's a mix between extreme saving, but also excessive spending. So more on that now. So in regards to Untact, we can say that the pandemic further accelerated the familiarization of Koreans to Untact services. So Untact can be in form of, for example, unmanned stores, just like in the picture on the right. This is an unmanned store by 7-Eleven, but it can also be in forms of self-checkout, pickup service, delivery, etc. But also very interestingly, we have observed that in the online, there was also an increase of Untact services. What that means is, for example, there was an increase in chatbot, one-click order, or anything that even reduces the human interaction even in the virtual world. So we can say that the general public is quite accepting of Untact in Korea, with almost 50% positively reacting to Untact and 42% being indifferent, meaning not opposed to Untact. 71% of Koreans also perceive an increase in Untact consumption, now predominantly because they leave the house less often since the pandemic, but also since people can now consume without worrying about time and place. So we had Untact before, but when we were thinking about Untact, it was more because it's convenient, it's quick. But now in the Corona era, we can say that Untact is important because it adds the factor of safety. Yes, and the home economy trend is also very closely related to a shift called 혼족 shift, which means that there is an increase in single households. That means people are more accepting of the fact that they spend more time at home and also alone. Now it will become more normalized. This means that there is going to be more use of O2O services, meaning butler services, delivery. And on the picture on the right, you can see an example from Sept 특공대. It's a delivery, it's a dry cleaning delivery service. They pick up your clothes that you can put outside and they will bring it back to you dry cleaned without ever having to meet you. Since the pandemic, their user base even doubled. So now food is also more consumed at home. And for example, Coupang Eats saw a sales increase of 130% during the pandemic, during the peak of the pandemic. And we have also seen something very interesting. Since people spend more time at home, there was also an increased focus on closer proximities. What that means is people spend more money also on home spaces, but also more time and energy for their local communities. We can say that this was mainly due to border closings, travel restrictions, also since Korea was more isolated during the time. And also since more entertainment is consumed at home, we also saw an overall increase of up to 4 hours app consumption during the peak of the pandemic. So the flex 차린고비 trend evolved during the pandemic. A representative of SK claims that fear about the unknown disease, but also the daily confrontation with death rates, that increased the need for Korean consumers to just seize the moment and be grateful for the moments that they are in. So that means that consumers tend to spend more on exclusive items whilst saving for necessities, for example. Especially among MZ generation, this trend was perceived very positively, as this is a way of expressing, hey, I am willing to invest in what I perceive that makes me happy. And poboksobi means revenge spending, and it has also been mentioned along with this trend. It means that people do impulsive bulk buying caused by frustration during the pandemic. We have seen that a lot, especially during the golden holidays in May. And also in response to that, many luxury brands have reacted with a price increase, for example. And then so despite the COVID-19, in the first quarter of this year, we even saw that the 3 major online department store sales in regards to luxury has increased from 22% up to 97%. And from March of this year to May, there was an additional increase of up to 22% on in those department stores. On the right side, you can see recent YouTube posts that show how young people flex. For example, there is a 1,000만 won flex competition on the very bottom. That means that someone went to a department store to spend $8,000 US. So the circumstances during the pandemic changed the shopping behavior of Koreans, and also 70% of Koreans claimed that the most anticipated activity after the pandemic will be an increase in online shopping, of course. So in the online, we saw more equal representations of age groups. So for example, more customers under the age of 20, but also age groups of over 50 have used online shopping more than before. We have also seen a lot of increase in live commerce, mostly due to probably because department stores and stores want to counteract the losses from offline shops. But also that means that customers now demand faster and fresher delivery. For example, I and many colleagues of mine exclusively order fresh food and groceries online, for example, on Market, Curly, and SSG. And Korean customers also demand more customized and localized, not only contents, but also services. In the offline, the overall sales has decreased, of course. However, we observed different recovery rates, meaning that indoor areas recovered much slower, whereas outside shops recovered much faster. Especially convenience stores have recovered completely by now. And also given the shift to online sales, offline retail spaces must now innovate to become experience providers rather than functioning only as sales channels. On the right top, you can see examples and extracts from Naver Shopping Live. It's their live e-commerce service. Naver and Kakao sales in the first quarter of this year saw an all-time high. And in response to that, they launched new features. So for example, up until now, Naver had provided brands with a smart store, but they launched an additional e-commerce service called Brand Mall. You can see it on the top right. The brand mall can be customized to the brand's liking and to their to their corporate identity and visual identity. Now they also offer more functions than the smart store. Naver also provides brands with exclusive ad products to maximize exposure and also for the conversion rate inside the Naver platform, covering an end-to-end shopping journey. So recently, Naver, as mentioned, has actively expanded its live commerce services called Naver Shopping Live. But also Kakao shopping service that is mainly led by gift shop has tripled its sales growth within 3 years since 2018. Kakao gift shop is much in line with the untagged trend since people cannot physically exchange gifts these days. Kakao Shop has also expanded its service with Tok Deal, allowing group buying and category mall. And also Kakao has officially launched their live commerce business early this year. So in response to the increased time spent at home, the usage of digital media rose from 6 to even 34%. Netflix and TikTok had the largest increase in the first quarter, and they have now entered the top 10 most used video and social media app. You can see that TikTok had a 34% increase, Netflix 27% increase in minutes spent. Also, by the way, the digital marketing advertising market in Korea has grown 15% year on year and has surpassed 5 trillion Korean won for the first time in 2019. And here on the right, you can see an example of how Laneige is using TikTok as one of their channels. So the gap between the customer journey stages awareness up until purchase has shortened a lot during the pandemic, but also before the pandemic. And consumers now prefer to have an option to purchase directly while viewing the content and receiving the information. That's why we observed an increased demand in shoppable content. And that is also why live commerce gained so much popularity. However, other social media platforms such as YouTube, Naver, Instagram are also becoming similarly potential platforms as shopping channels. And now, since people spend more time enjoying various media for entertainment, marketers should also consider how to increase the entertainment and fun factor in the content to leverage engagement. So be it a challenge or a live stream where people can communicate with the streamer, or even content where consumers can co-create. So on the top right, you can see an event that Gucci held to invite Koreans to experience their exhibition space called No Space, Just a Place. But also even in regards to local content, we can say that even before the pandemic, local social media channels and local media contents have proven to be 3 times higher in regards of engagement rate in Korea. You can see an example on the bottom right that the like number is much higher for a local content than for a globally mirrored content. Yes, and we can also say that localization has become more important now, as mentioned before, since borders have closed and people focus more on local proximities. We will now look into some specific industries to see the changes and trends. So for fashion and beauty, there was a significant decrease in sales in offline. But simultaneously, the online sales, especially on mobile, increased by almost the same amount that offline sales have dropped. So for example, we had 70% decrease in the offline, but almost 17% increase in the online. As some of you might know, fashion retailers such as Zara, they have decided to close all offline stores completely to focus on online sales, yeah, from now on. And also local brands such as Basic House, as you can see on the picture, decided to also take this opportunity to shift to the online entirely. And also on a deeper level within the fashion and beauty category, we observed that the demand for specific product categories changed a lot. Even in the online sales. So for example, whereas sales for cosmetic products such as eyeliner, lipsticks have decreased, skincare products such as cleansers, so even a 215% increase during the peak. Also, in terms of the recovery rate of fashion and beauty products differed. That means that more necessary fashion and beauty products recovered much faster, whereas, for example, accessories recovered a little bit slower. And in regards to hobbies and sports, it's very similar to other parts of the world. A lot of hobby-related activities move to home spaces. So baking and home gardening saw the largest increase among home activities in Korea. And also home training, hobby, self-development apps have increased a lot. But also relating products such as, for example, jogging outfits or home training products, etc. I think this plays a big role because fear and frustration caused by the pandemic made Koreans more aware of their mental and physical well-being, which is another keyword that I want to emphasize for 2020 Korea. So the gaming industry enjoyed a momentum during the peak. They saw a 35% rise in game app downloads even. Korean game companies saw an all-time high in terms of sales numbers, with, for example, NCSoft having even 93% sales increase in March compared to last year. Therefore, the gaming industry is receiving governmental support since May of this year to even curb the industry more after the in this momentum. And very similar to that, the OTT industry, meaning Netflix, but also local providers such as Wave and Season, saw a lot of many new subscribers and increase in sales too. So within 3 months from March on, the accumulated minutes of watching time on OTT platforms has increased 10 billion minutes. So while OTT entertainment and home entertainment rose, cinema, exhibition, and theater visits decreased by 62%, very similar to other parts of the world. And that meant for culture and entertainment industry in Korea that they had to find ways to shift the experience to the online. So K-pop concerts, for example, held by SM Town, but also Big Hit Entertainment, were successful in delivering engaging online concerts. You can see an example on the top right. Bangbangkon concert held by BTS had 50.5 million viewers in 2 days. But also, for example, LG Arts Center held its live concerts online, and Bucheon International Fantastic Science Fiction Film Festival was also done via a local OTT streaming service called Wave. So this success of these examples mean that they were able to quickly collaborate with the right technology partners to adapt new technologies and ways of delivering the experience. So you can see a very powerful image on the right side, whereas overall travel decreased, domestic travel increased a lot, with Jeju and Gangwon-do being the top destination this year. And since we still have a nationwide social distancing measures, Koreans more sought out secluded places that are closer to nature. But interestingly, for the money that they were not able to spend on flights and currency exchange, for example, more was spent on the quality of the accommodations, and also travel groups have become smaller, and the trip duration has become shorter. Also, because of the frustration and fear of the pandemic, Koreans were more willing to just go on a very short trip nearby with smaller groups. So we can now, we have seen that brands have typically responded in 3 different ways. Where some brands reacted more for temporary circumstances, meaning that they have reacted by using available resources for a time-appropriate response. Some have also taken measures to explore businesses, meaning that whatever opportunities that they explore, and if they pose to be successful, then that will be proof of for a future business. But also we've seen that, for example, Basic House, that some brands have taken this opportunity to, just overcome all the hurdles and accelerate the shift entirely to the online. So for each type, I would like to show case studies. So for the first example, we have Lush. They have more reacted rather than adapted to give temporary and fast empathetic messages to Korean consumers. One strength that they have is that they have localized social media channels, and they have, as you can see, started this campaign in January 28th, which was the beginning of the pandemic in Korea. It means that they have reacted quite fast. So what they did was they published on their social media channels that people are welcome to come into their stores and wash their hands for safety measures during the pandemic. So we can see that this is a very good example as they reacted very timely, but also because their action was much in line with the Korean situation, but also with their brand image. Hyundai Kia Motors held a digital unboxing event in April of this year. This, I believe, is a very good case for industries that rely heavily on offline sales channels, for example, automobile industry, but also insurance or furniture. So what they did was they really took their time with 3 moderators, but also with an extensive detailed video to highlight all the details about their car from the inside, but also from the outside. After that, they have provided supplemental videos where you can have a 360-degree VR view inside, but also from the outside of the car. So I think that could be a very good case of, if that works, that example can be adapted in future businesses, but also for future events, etc. And many brands could actually use this for themselves too. And if we look at how a brand has taken this opportunity to adapt to the new normal, we could mention Byredo. So in June 15th, what they did is they overcame the hurdles of what online purchasing So what they did was they overcame the big hurdle of purchasing a perfume online. So what's the big hurdle? You cannot smell the scent beforehand, but also if you open the package, you might not be able to send it back. So what they did is they, along with the product, they gave 3 little testers that you can try first. And if you like the product, you can then keep the product. But if not, you can send it back without any additional fee. So they overcame this hassle, but what they did is in the customer journey, if you have the consideration stage and the purchase stage, they shuffled the stages, meaning that customers can now purchase first and then make their decision whether they want to keep it or not. So now I would like to conclude with the key insights. By and large, we can say that brands must now understand the changes. What that means is the demand shifts are happening. So brands must ask themselves what demand shifts are happening within the brand's product categories and what can be done. But also it means what new customers do we have? What demographic shifts were there? But also there were dynamics in platform and social media. Now brands must understand which platforms that they can utilize. So keywords such as platform, content, product categories, demand, consumer time spending, demographics will need to be reassessed by brands. But we can also say that government regulations have changed very fast during the pandemic. And to give you an example, we have worked with a client that has been especially affected positively by the home economy trend. Since there was an increased home economy trend, the government reacted by loosening up the online payment services for liquor products. So that meant that we had to think of ways how people can order the liquor product online, but pick it up at a certain place, which we call click and collect. And also, given the uncertainties of the future and all the changes that happened within a short time, this period potentially poses a good time for brands to innovate and experiment with new marketing activities. So, for example, how can our brand bring the experience to the inside of a home? How can we build new services around that? And also, how can we potentially collaborate with growing, promising industries, for example, the gaming industry? So we, for example, have worked with a luxury brand to create a weekly art curation program on Kakao on a localized channel. And this was also motivated by the home economy trend. And this could pose to be a good activity, and this could continue for the long run since the reaction was quite positive. And lastly, as online solutions have become inevitable during the pandemics, brands must now challenge the conventional practices more than ever. The pandemic might be a time to shift offline activities to the online much quicker. So what can brands do to transfer the newly created customer experience? And how can brands now ensure to have the same or new quality in the online? How can retail spaces be reconceptualized, etc., etc.? So for example, ASIANCE is now working with some brands to implement live commerce strategies and also help with, for example, online beauty advisor concepts. All in all, we can say that the customer journey is transforming very fast. So to sum it up, the trends triggered consumption behavior in an interwoven manner, meaning that untagged home economy, flex charingobi, yes, they might have consequences such as untagged, meaning more reliance on online and digital touchpoints, but also an increased interest in more online options within all categories. And home economy means that there's a more of a desire for fun, engaging, and entertaining content. And that means that brands must deliver new forms of content. And the flex charingobi trend means that people want more exclusivity, personalization, but also there's more interest for unexpected and special collaborations. But it's not a cause effect per se. They trigger many consumption behaviors in an interwoven manner, meaning since we have all these insights, we must now look at e-retailer, e-commerce, content, service, product, many aspects. And those are, of course, different from industry to industry. So it was a lot of information, but we hope that this gave you insights to prepare your brand for the new, the post-COVID era. And we can help you with any questions you have here during the Q&A, also separately. So as you can see, we have here our email address. Feel free to reach out to us. And as we offer many services around digital marketing and e-commerce activities, we're always open for any requests. And also we have an extensive report on the post-COVID insights, and additionally offer customized case studies, but also recommendations tailored to specifically your brand. So feel free to reach out to us, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Gabi, for your presentation. Then yes, I propose you to continue with the Q&A session. We receive some questions before the session, and you can still continue to ask your question. The first one maybe it will be for Olivier. We have a question from Mr. Zhang Sang-un from the Seoul Metropolitan Government. Mr. Zhang is wondering if the increase of users of online shopping and food delivery apps is unique in Korea, and also if at Seoul we are leading the industry standards in this area.
Yeah, thanks, Cedric, for this question. So we can see that the increase in users of online shopping is not unique to Korean market. As we can see, the same level of increase in some other countries like in the US. Regarding the global economic pandemic, I'm not an economist, but we can see that in the media that each country will have its own plan to answer it. And we can see that the South Korean government released a digital and green economy development plan. It was last July, and a total of 160 trillion won will be invested until 2025. So that's about $140 billion. So that's quite nearly what we have actually in France from the French government plan. So that the economy, the society, and the culture of South Korea will be highly digitalized. So this plan will be divided in three parts. So the first one will be the Digital New Deal. Second part will be Green New Deal, and a stronger social and employment safety net. So in this digital specific New Deals part, the government will invest about 60 trillion won, which is about $50 billion. And create over 900,000 jobs. So I think that other countries should definitely benchmark this plan, as I saw for the past 20 years that Korea is strong at reaching their goal.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question may be for you, Gabi. You mentioned that current online shopping still misses the in-depth experience that we expect when we are making a significant purchase. In that sense, techniques of the gaming industries could be more extensively used to enhance that experience, as by definition, gaming is immersive. Do you receive more demands from companies, and do you think COVID triggered the need to develop further this new style of marketing?
Mm-hmm. First of all, as I have mentioned in the presentation, we have seen that engaging content is more important now than ever. And to name a few examples in the game industry, Nintendo, but also Blizzard, for example, have collaborated with fashion brands, for example. So Nintendo has collaborated with Louis Vuitton, but also Valentino, and Blizzard has also collaborated with Louis Vuitton. And I think that means that the virtual world is becoming a good alternative to the tangible world. And for example, another interesting example is that a camera app called Snow used a filter where people could try on the products before purchasing it. So yes, I believe that the demand for high engagement content, for example, gamification, has increased a lot. And although we haven't had many projects at ASIANCE so far, we always try to propose interactive marketing activities to our current clients.
Thank you. We receive some question about the new normal. Then maybe for you, Yongjoo, what will happen after when COVID will completely disappear from our life? How will be the balance between online and offline shopping?
I think whether it's before or after COVID, there was a shift from offline to online, regardless. For example, at an offline pop-up store, you can only contain 100 people in 1 hour, but online, you can probably sell about 1,000 items per hour. This is especially for consumer goods. So for most of the industries, the shift to online was already happening, and offline, it seems like it will become more of a subsidiary to online. That's what I expect after COVID.
Okay, thank you. We have received a question from Mrs. Jae-gyung Woo from Sanofi Pasteur. She pointed out that the COVID accelerates the global digital adaptation, but wonders what are the differences by age, industry, or job, in particular to understand the online behaviors of people. Maybe Olivier?
Yeah, since last March, I'm going to take data from US. The trajectory of online shopping definitely shifted. And it was a huge acceleration after two decades of steady growth. So the penetration rate, just to give you an idea of e-commerce, was around 5% in 2009. Last year, it was a bit above 15%. And the discussion that we have with our clients is to reach about 25% in 2025. Today, in US, it's nearly at 35%. 35%. So this is a 10 years growth since the beginning of the crisis. So I do not have the number yet for Korea, but for the people living in Seoul, we have all faced the issue with logistics at the beginning of this month due to this second wave of COVID-19. So we can definitely imagine that Korea will also be hitting these numbers. So the question now is, will the behavior of consumer continue on this trend next year, and how e-commerce platform will adapt?
Thank you. The next question is from Mrs. Paulina Kryshkova from G3 Partners. She asked that what will be the main threat and opportunities for the digital strategy of B2C brands, especially in beauty and fashion. Maybe Gabi?
Yes, that's a very interesting question. 조선일보, they gave a remark on that. They said that there is a new challenge to fashion and beauty. So that means that what 조선일보 said was, now brands must explain what the scent of a perfume is through the smartphone screen. So the biggest challenge for beauty and fashion brands is now that they have to sell the product and the features through an intangible way, and consumers cannot experience the product before the purchase. But I also think that with that also comes an opportunity. As we have seen, Byredo was able to bypass this problem with their innovative approach in delivery. But also we have seen that Basic House took the opportunity to entirely dedicate its sales focus to the online. So of course there are mentioned threats that those industries are facing, especially B2C, but also online opportunities offer various innovative solutions to those problems. So I'm thinking, might this not be even the right time for B2C brands to even reposition themselves and steer their business more into a future-oriented online strategy?
Okay, thank you. The next question is, what are the most common online marketing mistakes you observe among companies? Maybe Yongjoo?
Yes, I think the most common mistake that companies has is they fail to digitalize the marketing strategy. Many of the clients who come to visit ASIANCE, they come to us with marketing strategy that they have been using for TVs or print media, but digital is just totally different. Digital is not a subsidiary to offline anymore, even before COVID, even after COVID especially. So it's important for brands to come up with like specific marketing strategies specifically for digital and specifically for the local channels that you want to use.
Thank you. It's almost the time to finish, and I propose you to have the last question. For other question, maybe we can answer to you later. Then the last question is from Mr. Jeo Park from Koika. What capability will be most necessary to adapt to the new normal in Korea? Then maybe for you, Olivier.
So in terms of capabilities regarding how company can adapt to the new normal is, as Gabi actually was saying during the presentation, is really to unlearn and relearn how their consumer behavior will impact their business. And then unfortunately or fortunately, most of the companies will need to reorganize themselves with the right talents to integrate this change inside the company culture. So our experience shows us that during the digital transformation, you need the right people at the right place first before starting the integration of new digital concept. So we are talking about a new generation of decision maker. We are talking about digital specialists that will bring you to the next level. So if you only try to bring an outsourced expert, it will be very difficult for both parties to interact. And you may lose a lot of time and money to develop your strategy. So once the team is in place, you can look at also at open innovation platform to accelerate your growth with the help of startups instead of always reinventing concepts that already are on the market. So you really need someone that will be open to check innovative ideas that can match your industry and work with them.
Okay, thank you very much. It's now time to conclude. I would like to warmly thank Olivier, Gabi, and Yongjoo from ASIANCE to help us to better understand the key ongoing trends during the specific period we are living now, and to give us keys to adapt our digital strategy and to prepare ourselves to enter in the new normal. I also thank all the participants who joined us today. I hope to welcome you again to our next webinar. It will be on October 7th at the same time. We'll have the pleasure to receive Mr. Pierre Giacometti. From his point of view as an expert in communication and public opinion issues, Mr. Giacometti will explain how companies can respond to customers' new aspiration. We also launched today a Kakao group for FKCCI members. Then do not hesitate to join this group to exchange with us. And if you are not yet a FKCCI member, you can, of course, join both FKCCI and the Kakao group. I wish you a happy Chuseok, and thank you very much again.